So thanks everyone so much for coming to our community forum event. Just to give you a little rundown of how the event is going to go, we have some housekeeping items. These will be consistent at the start of every meeting moving forward. So if you're not here for one meeting, you'll still kind of get to hear this each time. Then we'll go into a community forum hosted by Erin Waldron. She's our guest moderator, and we'll leave about a half hour at the end for networking time, Q&A, really anything that falls outside of the community forum. They'll probably just bleed into that 4 to 4:30 time slot. So a couple housekeeping items. This is all of our contact info. We'll put this up in the community forum page afterwards so that you guys can reach out to us if you have any questions, if you need anything. I'm Caitlin McCluskey. Mary Griffin is not here today, and Greg is also here, and we are your TUG leaders.
Hey, y'all.
We realized that a lot of you guys don't know about this community forum page. This is hosted on the Tableau site, and this is where we post out updates on events. We have some resources here. We post links to the recordings from our meetings, and you can also share job postings if any of your companies are hiring for Tableau related positions. This is really like a place where you guys can communicate. So I have a link here. I think Greg is going to drop this into the chat. It's super easy to get signed up, and I believe your login, if you create that here, should also work for Tableau Public. Don't quote me on that, but it's super easy to get signed up. And if you're not in there already and your coworkers send you links to our event pages or anything like that, it's really good to get signed up here so that you get all of our communications. And we have some social links. Admittedly, we have not been super active on Twitter, but if you guys start to follow us there, we will definitely get better at that. And there's also a LinkedIn page. I believe this page is actually for more than just our user group. There's a couple of other user groups in the Colorado area that all kind of seem to funnel in here, but a lot of job postings are put in here, people just communicating about Tableau. So really a really good resource just to get kind of looped into. And if you request to join, then I will approve you. There's some other mods, so we all approve pretty quickly. So follow us there for more info in addition to the community forum. And some upcoming events. Next month, we will be meeting the second Friday of the month. Usually we meet the first Friday, but next month we have Labor Day, so we're moving it out a month. Keith Dykstra will be going over Tableau UX and UI hacks, a really good presentation. I believe he works at Interworks. And we have a second speaker, TBD. We're still kind of brainstorming what that content is going to be, but likely we'll have a second speaker. The first Friday of October, we'll have another community forum. We're looking for a guest moderator like what Erin is going to be doing today. November, we'll be meeting November 5th, and we have the really awesome Kevin Flerlogel of the Flerlogel twins, Tableau tipping and tips you never saw coming. He's a super awesome speaker. He puts out a ton of content. If you don't follow him, highly suggest following the Flerlogel twins blog, and he will be our sole speaker in November because he's really a huge rock star, and we just want to focus on him. And then in December, we're thinking about doing something in person, maybe a networking event, not really like formal Tableau content, just kind of get together and meet. So that's TBD. We're still kind of working that out, but just pencil in these dates onto your calendars, and we'll be posting the event pages on the community forum once we are a little bit closer to those events. If you're interested in speaking or presenting, we would love to have you. We have a new speaker sign-up form. I created the old form at my old company email address, and I no longer have access to it. So we have a new form. It's super easy to sign up. Just give us a little bit of info about what you're looking to present. If you have no idea, but you just want to get better at presenting, that's totally fine too. We're happy to work with you guys on content ideas, but we really want this to be driven by you guys and what you want to see. So if you're interested at all in speaking or even being a guest moderator like Erin is going to today, we would absolutely love to have you. And last, we were going to do this as a Zoom poll, but we had some technical issues. So if you could drop into the chat where you are in the Denver area, we're really trying to plan out where our potential hybrid in-person remote events could be. And this will help us figure out where people are located the most. And we'll ask this in the community forum as well. So we can get kind of like the whole community group answers from them. So just drop in the chat. 1, between Boulder County and Denver, 2, downtown Denver, 3 South Denver, 4 Colorado Springs, or 5 Fort Collins. And I'll leave this up for a minute so that you guys can answer. And Greg, just give me a heads up when it seems like we have a good amount of responses.
Yeah, I got a pretty steady flow coming in.
Perfect.
A lot of South Denver.
Good to know. And additionally, if you work in a co-working space that has like an event space, or your job has like a pretty nice conference room that we could use, and you're interested in hosting us, we would absolutely love any resources for that. Since Denver, the Denver Tug, we're kind of new getting started again. None of the current leaders have done any in-person planning. So we're coming at it from like a totally fresh perspective. So if you have any ideas, or if you want to offer up something, we would love that. Just reach out to us and we will work with you to figure out what event works best for that. Cool. Are we good to go, Greg?
Yeah, cool. Yeah, seem to got good
Awesome.
response.
Cool. Well, thanks, guys. We appreciate it. Great. So with that, I will kick it over to Erin. Welcome, Erin. She is the owner of the DataDozen and a tug leader for the Kansas City Tug, and that was how I got connected with her. So I will stop sharing, Erin, and pass it over to you.
Sounds great. So hello, everybody. It's wonderful to be here. I'm just kind of curious, so I'm going to open up the chat here and take a look. I saw at the beginning we had a couple folks introduce themselves. Melissa, I love that you are, I love your description of brand new dark room looking for a light switch. Definitely was there for longer than I would like to admit. I'm curious, drop in the chat or feel free to unmute since we're actually in that capacity. Just kind of curious before we jump into this, where is everyone in Tableau? You know, are you at the very beginning of your Tableau journey, just getting started? Or are you somewhere, you know, I kind of know my way around, I'm building some stuff, I'd like to get more advanced, or are you like, I'm just waiting for that Zen Master nomination to come on down? Where are folks? And feel free to unmute and because I don't just want to be the only one talking for the next hour and a half. So got some new users. Anyone brave enough to unmute and say where they're at in there?
Hey guys, I can start.
Yeah, great.
My name is Kostya. I'm in charge of data and analytics at a company called iLending Direct. I've never been in this forum before. It's my first time. I decided to kind of join and see what's going on. I've used Tableau actually I first got exposed to it in 2004. We had MicroStrategy at that company at the time. I just really loved it because I love pivot tables, and you know, Tableau is like pivot tables on steroids, right? So I'm in charge of data here. We have Tableau as a server, and we have over 200 users on Tableau. We have too many reports built in Tableau. In terms of my journey, you know, I'm a pretty advanced user. I only have one certification that I did last year, but I can do pretty cool stuff. Just wanted to see, you know, if anybody has any good, you know, examples of something I can learn. But you know, yeah, I use it every day a lot and use it a lot. So don't know if that's what you expected, but
that's perfect. That's great. Anyone else? Anyone on the other end of it, just starting out?
Hi, my name is Bob Linhart with Haynes Mechanical. So we just purchased Tableau, I don't know, 2-3 months ago. And so just trying to, there's about 3 of us who are trying to learn it and use it. Haven't taken any formal training yet. I think we're just getting ready to. We had a consultant come in for other IT purposes. He knows Tableau very well. He was trying to, help us, but he was, you know, going way too fast. You know, click here, do this, do that. And so it's been that's not the way I learn. So anyway, so it's all new, just trying to create, you know, coming from an Excel environment and trying to, you know, Tableau is so different. And so just trying to understand some things that even seem basic, you know, to do in like Excel, it seems more complex in Tableau. So just really trying to trying to learn it and trying to put basic, worksheets and dashboards together. First time in the user group, figured it might be a good place to bounce things or get feedback from other users.
Awesome, fantastic. So I'm seeing kind of in the chat kind of a handful of intermediate, some new folks getting started. That's awesome. Anyone else want to share kind of where they're at on the just opened the software, got frustrated and closed it to, Zen Master ready to present? All right. So let's do this then. We had kind of a lot of conversations, when we were sort of preparing for this event and thinking through like what some questions might want to be, where might we want to kind of get started. One of the questions that Caitlin and Greg and I were sort of thinking about is when we very first got started, trying to figure out where to even go with Tableau to start teaching yourself, to figure out what resources are there. That's a good place to start. So maybe we'll go ahead and I've got a couple of resources I'll share. Let me go ahead and share my screen here. And as I'm talking, go ahead and start thinking of other questions as well that we want to kind of get going. I'm going to come over here. Oh, by the way, I'm Erin. Probably should do this part of the presentation first. But my name's Erin Waldron. I am a big Tableau geek. I got my start working as an analyst in the academic setting. So I was working as an analyst in a graduate school administrative office, doing cohort analysis, admission analysis, that kind of stuff. Loved it so much that I spun off into my own business, own consultancy. So I get to do a lot of fun Tableau training, Tableau consulting. I get to work with students a lot, which is just such a blast. But adults love to learn too. So I have to say, I go back and forth whether working with students or adults are my favorite, because everyone gets such a kick when the light bulb moment happens. So that's me. You can find me at DataDozen.com. I've got all my contact information down here, email, find me on LinkedIn, Tableau Public, all of that. So look forward to connecting with you guys. Okay, so first thing, getting started with Tableau. If you're new, this is kind of preaching to the choir, but Tableau user groups are a great place to start. One thing that is pretty neat is that as the Denver group seems to be really getting off the ground right now and kind of still in a formative place, is that you've got a lot of say into what you want to see. Some of the user groups that are super established and have been going for 5-10 years, it kind of in lockstep with the with Tableau itself, aren't as malleable. So definitely, preaching to the choir here, but user groups are a great place to start as you're getting into the Tableau world. One of the weird silver linings of sort of the fact that all of our events for the most part have had to be virtual is they are recorded. So Tableau has done a fantastic job of actually recording all of the user group meetings. Like this one's being recorded right now. It'll get added to the mix here before long. But this is a great resource that I'll point people to on YouTube on the playlist of the Tableau user group stuff, looking through the agendas and seeing, is there anything that might be a good fit for what you're trying to learn as you're getting going. The other thing I'll say is when I think of getting started with Tableau, a big part of it is just getting it inspired and seeing what the tool can actually do. We've got some intermediate folks, they already know what the tool can do, they've seen it. You probably already have a little bit of an idea if you're actually present at a user group meeting. Quick show of hands, I wonder if I can see this in, let's see, where did Zoom go? If I can do a show of hands, I'm not sure if I can. I show participants, I think I can. Greg, will you raise your hand to see if I can? Yeah, okay, cool. I can see it. Awesome. So quick show of hands, who has ever been to TC, Tableau conference in some capacity?
Can I raise my hand again?
Perfect. See a couple of people. I'm seeing 3, 4, 5, 6. Some claps, yes, absolutely. Awesome. So I'm a big Tableau geek, obviously. They don't pay me to say this. I don't work for them, but I really love Tableau Conference. I would say that if you haven't been before and you're able to ask your company to go, there is something really special about the first time that you go to an in-person Tableau conference. I do not know whether that will be this year or next year or the following year. We're all sort of in a very fluid place right now. But one thing that is neat is last year's conference was entirely virtual, and which means it's been recorded. So another sort of piece of the puzzle for getting inspired would be to go check out everything that's available with the Tableau conference as well. Okay, that would be the first sort of component I'd recommend for people that are getting started, get inspired. The second component I would recommend is know how to structure your data. So I'm gonna pull up all the participants again. Everyone put your hand down. Raise your hand if structuring the data has been a challenge for Tableau, or phrased differently, the first time that you went to connect your data to Tableau, things were more difficult than you thought they might be. I'll give a moment for the hands to think about. Coming on up. So we're at maybe a third of folks. The other 2/3 of you just ran off into the sunset with your data sets. All right, we're at about half now. This is getting more honest. Thumbs up. All right. Maybe you were good, Dave, or maybe it wasn't too difficult. Tableau expects the data to be structured the way that you would find it out of a relational database. So if you are in a situation where you have this big, beautiful SQL server, or your data warehouse team has done a phenomenal job of getting clean data ready for your analytics team, or you're in one of those situations where you actually connect Tableau and it looks like the, sort of superstore data that we all have come to know and love, then fantastic. That was not my case. That was not the case of most of the clients that I work with. Usually that's actually where folks land in conjunction with me, isn't so much actually even building or in Tableau or getting training in Tableau. It's why won't my data set work in Tableau? And it has to do with how the Tableau expects the data to be structured. So one of the things that I would say is if you've connected to practice data sets, or you've gotten started in a training and then you come home or go back to the office and try to connect to your data stuff, and suddenly things that made sense in that training or things that made sense with that consultant suddenly break down and Tableau is not working the way you anticipate, it usually has to do with how your data is structured. So I have done a talk on this before. There are fantastic resources out there. I will just say, very short and sweet, in case it helps someone that's on the call today. Tableau expects the data to be structured the way that Hadley Wickham, he came up with this phrase called tidy data, which I think is really helpful. I go into this whole talk, you can find it in that YouTube of all the tugs for a KC tug. But one thing that I just always want to kind of point people back to is the data structure. So the Tableau does expect the data to be structured in this sort of tidy data format. It's what we would see in a relational database. That is one column per variable, one row per observation, and one table per observation type. So if you are someone that's like, yeah, I've got my data working, this doesn't matter for me, just toss it aside. But if you're someone that's like, yeah, I'm really struggling to get Tableau to work as fluidly as I thought it would, it's usually a data structure problem. You will keep running into that same wall in a frustrating way until you kind of can take a step back, get the data structured, then connect it to Tableau. So I'll stop. I'm going to pause there because I want to check out the chat real fast and see, does anyone, just for folks who may be in that data structuring phase or maybe past it, does anyone have an advice for anyone else regarding data structure or resources you found helpful? Or is anyone, have you been there or are you there now? Open to the floor.
Maybe break the ice, and Caitlin and I were just talking about this, but Tableau Prep, which we might talk about, is a free product that you can download with Tableau as well. I find it actually a little bit, I like the usability of being able to see some of the data transformations as they go along, and you can kind of troubleshoot that way. So the troubleshooting can be kind of the frustrating part. So being able to kind of pick that apart and run down where your errors might be with like clean steps along the way in prep, I found super helpful.
Awesome.
Did it a lot
And
this week.
yeah, and maybe that's another question for the group. Who's using Tableau Prep? So put your hands down and raise your hand if you're in Tableau Prep world. Got a couple people. Yeah. Got Alteryx with George. Yeah, so Tableau Prep, I haven't used it nearly as much as I often wonder sometimes if I should. Probably has to do with more just the clients that I happen to have worked with. Either they've got their data warehouse all set up and they're rocking and rolling, or I work with also really tiny clients that have tiny archival made from scratch data sets where we're actually going to go fix it in the data set. But Tableau Prep works so well for data that is coming in constantly and going to be cleaned in the same way. So if you're connecting to data sources that are have constant entries coming in, and I used to live in St. Louis, the number of ways that you can spell St. Louis is pretty remarkable. If you're trying to sort of standardize that kind of stuff as you go, that can be really helpful. And then structuring it. If you've got data sets that need to be merged, need to be pivoted, that kind of stuff can be really helpful. Caitlin, I know you are in Tableau Prep quite a bit. What does that look like for you?
Yeah, in the job that I just started, we use Tableau Prep as kind of an alternative to Alteryx right now, but we're trying to get onto Alteryx soon. And we will bring in data from like our data warehouse and then join it up so that it's kind of like all tidy and like structured the same way and like using all the same naming conventions and everything before it then goes through a flow into Tableau server and then refreshes on like a daily basis. And that's what we seem to be doing for like all of our clients.
Very neat, very neat. Anyone else? Any other Tableau Prep experience, recommendations, warnings, anything like that?
Yeah, I surprisingly, okay, I can turn my camera on. I'm not eating anymore. I was surprisingly enjoyed using Tableau Prep for the first time a few weeks ago. I had kind of like you're saying, like I had, been hitting my head against a wall with my database, could not get my visualizations to work. I just didn't. So finally, no matter workaround I was trying, I finally was like, okay, let me just research this. We've had Tableau Prep, finally decided to watch some videos, like, okay, how do I use this? And it was surprisingly easy to use considering how, when I first got access to Tableau, it was kind of like a steep learning curve, but Tableau Prep didn't feel that way. And I don't know if it's just because the visualization makes it pretty easy to drop and add and do all of the things that you might need to do. So did that, got my data cleaned and pretty, and was able to upload, and voila, like was able to fix the issue that I was having with my visualization.
Yes, and I think that's so, I mean, that happens to be the case so often, right? It's like you're hitting that, like, why doesn't this visualization work? It's like, oh, this is way more at the root of how this is structured. I'm curious, was your data problem more, because I think of like messy data in kind of two types. We've got the cells, the stuff in the cells, the actual content is messy. We've spelled St. Louis 3 different ways, or the structure, the order of the cells, like how we put the Legos into columns and rows structure is messy. So what was your situation?
Both. So I work in financial aid, and so financial aid data is constantly changing as students are getting more aid, they're applying, they're appealing, whatnot. Their student record is changing essentially, right, as well, like as they move up in classes, and that can change through the year. And unfortunately, our data isn't frozen because it's just too much that's changing. And so I wasn't able to kind of match some things up to appropriate terms essentially. And I had to use a couple of different databases that just weren't playing well together. So I finally decided to do everything in prep so that I was really only importing a cleaner, just base data sheet rather than trying to merge all these things, write some queries to get to the right, indicators for the students that I was looking for. And it made it much simpler. And now I'm just trying to have to figure out now how to make that. I think I can automate the Tableau Prep cleaning process. I just haven't gotten to that part yet.
Well, I think I love that sort of getting it where you know it's working at least once is like, oh, hallelujah. All right, we that built. I'll tell clients sometimes, I'm like, let's just clean like 10 rows of data and try to build our bar chart and see if it comes through. And once something actually drags and drops appropriately, then you're like, okay, we can replicate this. We can make a system around this. So congratulations. That's a huge milestone.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Yeah, here's a question we've got from James. James, do you want to, I can read it off for you, or if you want to sort of give us some context as well, you're welcome to jump in here.
Yeah, so I just had a question about how everybody approaches modifying or maintaining complex workbooks that somebody else has built. So in my role, I've inherited some of those, and I feel like I'm a pretty strong intermediate Tableau user, but it gets confusing when you don't have documentation and you're really going into like a cross tab with calculations that are built on top of calculations. And I've got like 20 context filters and I'm not sure where they came from, if they're applied on that worksheet or if they were coming from somewhere else and they're carried over to that worksheet. And then it's got other filters and that sort of thing. So obviously, I mean, I can go back and trace my way out one element at a time or try to reverse engineer it. It doesn't seem like there's I haven't found a really good way to approach it other than those things. And I just wondered if you guys had thoughts on tips on how you might approach something like that.
Yeah, fantastic. I always joke with clients that like the fun part is being the person to get to create the first workbook, and the not fun part is being the person that either inherits it from someone else or even just has to maintain it yourself, or you open it back up like the next quarter or the next year, and you're like, oh my gosh, what did I do here? So commenting out your code isn't just for colleagues, it's for yourself in the future too. So yeah, I can definitely relate, and it can be a time-consuming process to really understand what's there. And I'm curious to hear kind of from the group, is anyone else, inheriting dashboards and workbooks that they're having to maintain or unravel? Any recommendations on, if someone has best practices around documentation, anything like that?
I just went through this really extensively at my last job, where we got dashboards that had been built by analysts 4 or 5 years ago who were no longer at my company or the client's company. And I really didn't find a good way to trace things back besides just manually doing it. And it's definitely like a spaghetti code process. But if you can just dedicate like a bulk of hours up front and just like get really good with like going through each of the formulas, backtracking until you find where there's nothing left, and commenting, making like a glossary tab. If there's any like context filters on sheets, using like the caption to denote what those are and like why those are there. And you might realize as you're going through that, oh wow, that's not really needed. And you can kind of do that cleanup as you go. But it's a super manual process. But like Erin said, it's not just for your colleagues, it's for yourself. And I admittedly really bad at doing that with myself, but I've gotten a lot better after I went through a really awful process.
Right. Yeah, I talked to one of my colleagues, and it sounds like the person that developed is more of an application than a dashboard or visualization. And it sounds like the person that developed it spent 6 months doing nothing but building this thing out, but there's no documentation that I can find on it. And I've got to fix probably a level of detail calculation that's embedded somewhere in there. And it's kind of hard to trace back, but yeah, I appreciate that.
I would say too, one recommendation that I always will throw back to people when you are kind of wading knee deep through a Tableau workbook that is not going well, is to always make sure that you come back out and ask whoever is asking for it how much they actually need it. One thing I've found, or if there's a piece of it, so if there are 30 components to a workbook that I'll open up, I will say, help me understand which is the most important. And if they say all of them, I say, okay, but you can only take 3 to the desert island. So if you could only take 3 dashboards, which would you pack in your suitcase? That usually will help get the conversation going, because I have found times on a broader scale where sometimes the stakeholders or the boss or the individual who might be requesting the work out of the Tableau workbook doesn't necessarily know how much time they're asking for. So you ask a stakeholder or someone, hey, which of these things do you need? Well, for one of them, it takes you 10 minutes to do, no problem. I can spin that up and get it back to you. And for other folks, then it can be like, oh, well, I didn't realize I was asking you for 3 weeks of work. Never mind, it's not that important, and come back. So that can be another helpful place to start for sure. Calculated fields came up here. Let me share my screen again. I've got a few things that I would recommend as well. One of the questions that that we had talked about with Greg and Caitlin was sort of like how, if you were new to Tableau and you're trying to understand the calculations, where do you kind of start? So one thing I always point people back to is that Tableau desktop in their documentation, their help is actually really surprisingly good for a big company like this. So I always point people there first to the help page. I would say that one of the first things I would sort out if you're new to Tableau and working with the calculations is the difference between table calculations and calculated fields. So if I hop over to Tableau real quickly, let me just hop over into, move the little zoom bar here that you guys can't see that's in my way. Let's say we just make, I'm always working with academic data because that's where I came from. So I'll just go ahead and let's see, this is university admissions data. So let's just look at the institution. We're looking at AAU schools if you happen to be in that academic world. And then let's look at like the number of applicants that you're looking at. So a table calculation is going to be a calculation that you're actually doing within the context of the worksheet. So it is going to be something that is calculated within this space. So for example, we can take the number of applications received over this 10-year period, and we could do something like add a quick table calculation and say, go ahead and rank these so that we could go ahead and see them ranked, who got the most applications, who got the least, something like that. A calculated field is going to be actually creating a new column basically in your data set. So I, being a complete geek, like to put my calcs, I always do a little prefix of CALC, so I know that I made them, because usually with calculations, if something goes wrong, it's probably something I've introduced. And when you actually go ahead and create your calculations, you are adding a new column into your data set. You're not actually going back and tacking that on in Excel or SQL, wherever your data source is coming from. You're never adjusting with Tableau that underlying data source, but it's the equivalent of actually going ahead and adding new variables. Those are your calculated fields. If you look at all of the functions that Tableau has, this can get pretty overwhelming pretty quickly because there are so darn many. So what I would recommend is if you're actually trying to get started with calculations, there are, I'll come back over here, some helpful sort of all of the functions if you want to sort of have a comprehensive exploration. But as you're doing that, for me personally, when I've been trying to learn these, this is not nearly as helpful as actually just having a case where I need to use that function and actually just going and finding it and actually testing it out. So what I would say is it's helpful, sure, to be able to click on a function and see what the documentation is, how is it described. But honestly, behind the scenes, what I would say is this might fall a little bit more into the just-in-time learning, getting your hands sort of dirty with the calculations that you need to solve a certain problem. That has been, at least for me, the best way to start getting into calculations and understanding how they work. So with that, let me stop sharing. I'm curious, other folks that are sort of in the calculation world, either unraveling other people's calculations that they've made, or maybe you're on the newer end just trying to get started. Where are folks with that, with calculations, or recommendations for folks who might be just starting out if you're a little further along? Any best practices, things that you think work well?
Everyone, I think one thing I've been doing is, especially since we talked about Tableau Prep, and this is another place that has helped me, is just try to get as many calculations as possible in Tableau Prep itself, just to have somewhat better performance in the final visualization. I have been in situations where sometimes you have to do the final calculation in Tableau itself, but other than that, I try to keep as much as possible in the backend.
I love it. I love that idea of like moving some of that stuff left in the process so that you get consistency as well. Because then if you go to create a new workbook or you hand it off to a colleague, then those you got kind of that single source of truth working from a lower level than something that it's very easy to have a workbook where suddenly you've spun up, 30 different calculations and you're forgetting how they all kind of nest together. So I love that, getting that back into Tableau Prep or some sort of more fundamental layer. I think that's a fantastic best practice. Any other thoughts with calculations or other recommendations? That's a great one.
There's a really good workbook on Tableau Public. I'm trying to find it right now that has like an example for like every type of calc. And I think like Kevin Flerlogel or Andy Kriebel, one of them had put it out. I'm looking for it. When I find it, I'll put it in the chat.
Fantastic. Yeah, and let's kind of, that's a great segue too into some other resources. Perfect. Calcs. Excellent. Ryan Sleeper is a great resource out of Kansas City. So I'm always proud to proud to have Kansas City.
And I'll try and drop in some as well. There's a lot of good, you could do like hours just on date calculations, which if you work with dates a lot. I work with a lot of sales data, which is, date based. So I've spent a lot of time working on date calculations. There's good, I attended a TC sessions just on dates. So there is literally like hours devoted to just doing date calculations, which aren't always intuitive, but once you get good at it, they're super useful.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then maybe that's another question, is sort of like, as you're kind of figuring out, you think of like TC and you go and then there's infinite sessions to choose from and you're like, oh my gosh, I could dive into this tool infinitely, into specializing. I'll never know everything, but how do you kind of keep your skills up? Another thing that I'll just go ahead and share my screen here. Another thing I always recommend is if you're either at an intermediate level or at a beginner level, this would be sort of two different ways that I have enjoyed learning. So one of them would be with these sort of weekly workouts. These are community-based sort of opportunities to exercises is kind of the way I like to think of them. They provide you a data source or a challenge in some way, and then you just participate. And maybe you time box it so you only have an hour or 2 hours to devote to this, and you go ahead and do that, and you don't sort of infinitely obsess about, I can make it a little better. The point is to get to the gym and do the workout. But there are a couple that I always like to point out. Makeover Monday is probably the most famous. They give you a data set, they show you the original visualization, then everyone takes that data set and goes and makes their own visualization. And there's fantastic examples that have come out of this. And it's really nice because the data set you're going to get is already ready for Tableau in some capacity. So if you're also, I always kind of veer off here, the small tangent to loop back in is that if you're starting to get better at Tableau and you're thinking, gosh, I kind of wish I could have a job where I do Tableau full time, the best way, in my opinion, to get a job working with Tableau is to have one heck of a portfolio to point back to. And so participating on a weekly basis with Makeover Monday or Workout Wednesday or one of these groups can be a fantastic way to kind of build up that portfolio as you go, get it on Tableau Public, get it where an employer could actually see it. Usually, it's very easy to look back at our work at the very beginning and be like, oh gosh, did I actually build that? But it's so neat to see the progression of how your skills progress with these kind of activities. So Makeover Monday is a fantastic one. Workout Wednesday is a great one as well, whereas Makeover Monday is tool agnostic, and you could participate with R, Python, or whatever it might be, Power BI, R, Google Data Studio, whatever. Workout Wednesday is specifically with the Tableau challenges. They've got Power BI, so it's a tool-specific challenge that you'll be working on, and it's really neat to see how these challenges, it's a technical challenge. How do you actually do this? if you're getting into Tableau Prep, there is a community called Prep and Data, which is really fun. They give you, same idea, different problems to go solve, and then they post the solution. So you can kind of go see if you can figure it out, but then know that the back of the book is there for you to reference later. Another one that has come out very recently, end of last year, is, it looks like it's got a bi-monthly cadence here. So this is called real world fake data. So it gives you data sets that actually look like the real world, whether that's, they're sort of industry specific, which is much more helpful than everyone saying, well, just open up Superstore data and get started with Tableau that way. So those are some things I'd recommend. The other thing that for me personally was how I learned Tableau was actually getting started by just going to the Tableau public gallery and downloading and deconstructing workbooks that I found interesting. And so I would, each morning when I sat down at my desk, when I was very first getting started with Tableau, go either to the gallery, hunting for a chart type I'd never made. So if I had never made a scatter plot or a Gantt chart or whatever it might be, I would actually go try to find one, download it, deconstruct it, see how it was made. And over time, I've also used this as a reference point for not just how do you make a specific chart, but like, oh gosh, that's so beautiful. How did they design that? How did they get that formatted that way? And so these can be fantastic points of inspiration, as well as an opportunity to actually build those muscles. When people are getting started with Tableau or at an intermediate stage and they feel their skills either stagnating or having trouble getting off the ground, I like to remind people that continuous practice is really the only way that we get good at anything. It's very easy, I think, sometimes in our jobs for bosses to be like, well, I sent you to training for 3 days and now why aren't you perfect at Tableau? And it's like, gosh, that's just not how learning a new skill works. You don't send someone to, a 3-day event and say, now you can play the guitar really well, or now you can speak French, or whatever sort of long-term bigger skill set we're actually trying to acquire. The folks that have really figured out Tableau are, doing that continuous practice. And when you're looking for a way to do that, you could either sort of take the community route and join some of these sort of weekly or monthly workouts, or you can just download work that is really inspiring to you and kind of pick it apart and see how it works. If you're wondering, like, whose work should I go to? I'm kind of tired of the viz of the day. I always recommend go to the Zen Masters, find out who's here. And then you can always find, you can open these up. I'm going to point to, let's find another. Here's Lindsay Poulter, another Kansas City person. I'm always trying to raise awareness about Kansas City folks. And you can just go to their Tableau public profile and start downloading their work there. So I'll stop sharing there. Sports Viz Sunday is another great one. We've got some great resources here, another calc resource. These are fantastic. I will actually go ahead and real quickly just drop all of those links I just shared with everyone. So if you're wanting to copy and paste the links we've got going here, I'm about to just drop a ton of links here into the chat, but feel free to copy and paste those as well. That's everything that I've shown on my screen. So yeah, talking about sort of either practicing ways that you've found helpful, actually learning the tool or getting better at the tool, or any thoughts about participating with a Tableau public portfolio in some capacity. And it's hard to be brave and actually publish stuff on Tableau public. So anyone want to speak to that process for folks who might be considering it but not quite ready to dive in yet?
If you're at all scared to publish kind of like publicly, you can always make it private until you feel like kind of ready to like flip the switch. I did that when I first started because I was just like, my stuff is like so much worse than like everything I'm seeing. And then I finally started seeing other things that were like as bad as mine, and it made me feel empowered. So just like the longer your portfolio is, the better. And it's really good if hiring managers can see kind of progression from like where you're not super great and then you get more creative. So if they can see a progression, I think that's even better than if you're just like right out the gate, like amazing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, one, it's a invaluable experience in terms of learning and going through those iterations. I did Make Every Monday quite a bit, and learned probably more from that in maybe 2 months than I had in 2 years, just kind of going through the cycles. But the act of actually publishing and putting yourself out there, and I'm not like a progression over perfection person. I'm like, especially in a creative aspect, which data viz can be. So just that repetition and just like putting yourself out there and getting that feedback, especially if you're in an organization where feedback is important. It kind of builds out these other soft skills of, trying to get work products out the door that are, good, but also willing to, not perfect and willing to improve on. That aspect of it was maybe equally as important.
Fantastic. Any other thoughts? Skill building in Tableau. How do you get good? Or better, maybe is the right way to say it.
Well, I do have a question in terms of using or publishing to Tableau Public. Did any of you have to find, I guess, take the skills that you use from building dashboards for your work, but recognizing you couldn't necessarily publish that? And so then having to rebuild something else that was using the same skill sets, but not the same data. And maybe not even being directly applicable to what you do day to day.
I can definitely say yes. Sounds like I was kind of in a similar job that you are in now, where I built so much stuff, but it was all with student data. And of course, not exactly FERPA, or if you're in medical world, HIPAA compliant to take that in any capacity outside. So definitely, I have rebuilt many things with different data sources. I'll actually show you one example that what I would recommend if since you happen to be in, let me see where this would be. Let's go here, I believe. One of the things that I did was, since I had a lot of experience with academic data, I went and tried to figure out how to get academic data as well. So I believe, so this was similar to something, make this bigger, that I had built at my job, but I was looking at department level stuff, where I was looking at selectivity and yield over time for different departments. And then I tried to think, how can I think of selectivity and yield with admissions data? Is there public data that I could actually work to kind of replicate as an example of what, here's what I can do, but I can't actually share that data. So IPEDS data became, from the National Center of Education Statistics, became the thing that I was like, oh, this is free, I can get that and I can download that. So that was at least one example. I'll go ahead and stop sharing if I can find the Zoom world. Oh, I didn't share it all, did I? Share screen. There we go. Can you see that? Quick sanity check.
Yeah, and iPads makes complete sense. So thank you for pointing that out.
Yeah, so that was one of the first steps, is I sort of, especially going out on my own, I had done several years in academia, and I was so proud of this portfolio of work that I had built. And then I stepped out of the ivory tower and I was like, oh my gosh, I don't have a single dashboard that I could show a soul. And how do I start building that stuff out? So that would be one of my recommendations. And that's why I always like to point people back to the real world fake data resource as well, so that if you happen to be in human resources or in some other capacity, if you've built some concepts or some chart types you're really proud of, trying to find something that is analogous enough, and then being a big component of, go ahead and grab a piece of scratch paper and jot down, at least sketch out what your your chart looked like, or your dashboard looked like, while it's still fresh in your head, and you can kind of draw inspiration from that as you go out. Yeah, Clay, I see a great comment here. I'd love for you to just share with the group if you're comfortable.
Sure. Sorry about the camera.
No, not at all.
What I found is there's so many resources out there in so many different locations. It's pretty easy to get overwhelmed. So
Absolutely.
what's best for me is to try to find a question or something that I'm really interested in and I want to find out the answer to, and then build it. And it's usually a pretty clunky sheet to start with, or a dashboard or whatever. Then I'll try to get somebody else that I like and that's not too mean to give me feedback on what I'm trying to present. Because the technology of Tableau is so amazing, but you can really overwhelm your receivers quickly. So then I present it to them and see what questions they have, and then I'll try to reincorporate that. And I think the key is to try to stay really interested in the data you're working in. Superstore it's Superstore. I mean, it's fine, but it's finding something that you love and it kind of draws you in and keeps making you ask more questions.
Absolutely. Oh, I think that's so fantastic. And I think, one of the things that I love from Makeover Monday and stuff is even if I'm not going to participate in, a weekly challenge, even being able to go back and you can see all of the data sources that they have ever presented. They've done this for years. So you can kind of go back and take a look and say, all right, I'm trying to build a new skill here, or I'm trying to try some new stuff. Let me find some data sets that really resonate with me that I know are Tableau ready. I know they're going to be structured correctly, and I'm not going to do what tends to be 80% of the job, just getting the data ready up front. And then I completely agree with what you said, Clay, about, Tableau is fantastically interactive, and it can be, you can kind of be a kid in the candy store when you first get started of wanting to use absolutely every interactive feature and filter and tooltips and everything all at once and expect that folks will know kind of what you're doing. So I love your recommendation of finding a friend who will actually give you honest feedback in a constructive, helpful way. One of the things that's really hard is we are usually not our audience. We don't build dashboards for us. And so by the time you've taken the time to build a dashboard, prep the data, deconstruct it, troubleshoot it, all of that, what you're looking at so well. And when you hand that off to someone else for the first time, they don't necessarily know the data, let alone they may not know Tableau. And folks can be scared they're actually going to break it. They're, out of respect for all your hard work, they don't want to mess it up. So finding ways to put your audience at ease and kind of fold them in, I think is really helpful advice as well. Any other thoughts, advice as you kind of are either building those skills or even getting feedback from folks about, all right, I got a draft. Here's where we're at with, this first round. Any thoughts about that?
Yeah, just to kind of add on to that, I've presented a lot of Tableau stuff to people who aren't real data oriented, but they need this information. They'll just agree with you regardless of what you say because it looks like you're smart. Even though your intent is to, hey, let's get some feedback back and forth. So people don't want to seem dumb if they don't understand what you're saying. I would just, I don't know a way to make them comfortable when you're actually presenting to the people that need the information. So trying to get somebody who's pretty critical has helped a lot.
I think that's great. And you're totally right. No one wants to seem dumb. No one wants to be the person that's uncomfortable, doesn't know what they're looking at. I feel like the truth is that most of us, when we look at a chart, no matter what it is, no matter what the dashboard is, how well it's made, often our first reaction is like, oh, that's a lot of bars, or oh, that's a lot of bubbles. Guess they mean something. And sometimes that's about as far as we get, even being in this community, even being folks that are really comfortable with this. And so the one recommendation that I have found that will help a little bit is to potentially enter those conversations, especially if they're meant to be like working sessions where you're not presenting to someone the findings, you are sharing a draft that you're trying to get feedback from and really framing the meeting and the conversation in that way. And then say, I'm assuming that I have somewhere along the way dropped the ball in communicating what's in my head to what's here. What is confusing, and kind of starting right at kind of what might hit you in the heart, be like, oh, I worked so hard to make that obvious, but just asking, help me understand, what here doesn't make sense. And it might be the whole thing. And then usually just sitting back, zipping your lip and listening. Yeah, definitely, that doesn't make sense, and trying to pull them out. But I completely agree with you, Clay. That can be such a hard place to kind of get the conversation going. Any other thoughts about, designing for a specific audience? I love where this conversation has veered.
I was going to actually say the same thing that Clay was saying. Everybody will agree with you. My majority of my audience is salespeople, and salespeople are very agreeable to everything, right? And they'll be sitting there like, yeah, this is great, so great, good stuff. And then you look at the server and nobody looked at this dashboard for 2 months. So
yeah,
what I found, is kind of checking in from time to time. If nobody's using it, I'm trying to understand, trying to talk to people. And what the biggest challenge that I faced, at least, is we're trying to create some, the analysis that's too complicated and it's not actionable, right? So you kind of create this cool visualization that has all these colors, interactivity and whatever, but people have full-time jobs. They don't have time to necessarily go through and kind of click on everything. So instead, it's more like, what we tried to do is, instead of creating a dashboard that's for everyone, have put user filters so you can do the security, the row level security. So and have reports sent out or dashboards sent out to specific users with, here's a list of items that you need to look at, or here's the metric that's out of tolerance, go look at it, and then still kind of check in. I mean, are you using this report? Maybe it's outdated by now. Maybe something we created 6 months ago is not relevant anymore. So that's, kind of that continuous feedback. It's not just with Tableau, right? It's with any kind of analytical solution. Is important. Don't think that if you have a very an amazing dashboard from your perspective, that your audience is just using it all the time and finding it useful.
I love what you say there about actually going to look on server and see whether something has actually been used. So that's always my first question for my clients when they're like, okay, we want to build this. I'm like, okay, who's the audience and what's our metric? How do we know whether they're using it or not? And that may be Google Analytics, that may be Tableau server, but it can be a hard question to actually force yourself to look at, because gosh, I spent 6 months creating this beautiful dashboard series. What do you mean like 2 people have clicked on it? That's absolutely just spot on how to make sure that the work you're creating actually matters. And it's not easy to do. One example that you mentioned, everyone has full-time jobs, and I think that's really astute as well. It's so obvious and simple, and yet it's so easy to forget when our full-time job is in the dashboard creation. One of the best analogies that I've read recently, and this comes from Cole from storytellingwithdata.com, but she makes a distinction between a distinction we talk about all the time of an exploratory dashboard or explanatory dashboard. Exploratory dashboards tend to be what we think of with Tableau. You've got filters, you've got all these parameter actions and set actions, and you can interact. The idea being someone's going to bring their knowledge, their domain knowledge to this tool. They're going to glean insights you wouldn't be able to as the analyst because you're not the content expert, but you've got something that's very interactive and something that they can actually explore. On the other side of the house, you've got the explanatory dashboards. Those are going to be the dashboards that explain something that's already been found. Those tend to be things that we do when we're actually more the content experts. I looked at the data, I have the context of the problem or the project, and I can tell you what happened. And if folks are expecting an explanation instead of an exploration, here go open all of these different different possibilities isn't actually helpful. The example that Cole uses that I think is so helpful is that an exploratory dashboard is when someone is actually going to go open all the oysters themselves, hoping to find a pearl. And the explanatory dashboards are, don't worry, as the analyst, I've already opened all of the oysters that I can at least think of. Here are the 2 pearls that I want to share. And so I think that can be can be an important thing to come back to. And I think you're spot on with, people have jobs. And, if they're looking for just the oysters, we want to make sure that's what we're giving them.
One more note on that, like strategy wise, that I've found effective is like kind of putting on your product manager hat or your designer hat and like actually observing people use your dashboard. Hopefully they're using it, but before even rolling it out, asking people to use it. The strategy I take, at least just from insight perspective, like is this is the message coming across and I'm intending to have come across. I asked my wife to look at it, who I don't work with. But I'll just have her take a look and tell me like what the things that stand out, or like what she's able to glean from those things, and kind of use that to gauge where I need to take it.
I think that's fantastic. People do not have to be a content expert. The best person that I hand dashboards to is my husband, and I say, okay, break it. And even being in tech, like 3 buttons later, he's like, well, this is down to just one, oh, I didn't realize I didn't disable that. Suddenly he's accidentally filtered down to just one university out of 200. He can't get back. He's confused. So yeah, that's a fantastic strategy. I love that.
Yeah, super easy to forget that like you're in it all the time, and most people aren't. So it's a good strategy. Looks like Jeff does that as well.
Yeah, I love it. The spouse check. Yep. I love it. They do. They must be. We're racking up a bill, I'm sure, with all of our, hey, will you take a look at this? And I see a question here from Clay about the storyboard feature. I think we're kind of moving into that 5 o'clock Q&A time, if that's okay, Caitlin.
Yeah, go for it.
Awesome. So yeah, storyboarding, or the story points feature, is that something that people use? I know on my end, if I can share a screen really fast. Share this here and I'll show you how I use it. So let me go back to here. So when I'm doing presentations, I do a fair number of presentations. I do like workshop type things. So I'll usually have like a finished dashboard that I'm doing. That is usually when I'm going to be in some sort of presenting mode. Usually story points can be a great way to do it. So I've got like, a welcome slide. Oh, this is all going to go ahead and here you go, Tableau Public. A welcome slide. I've got, different things going through here. And then I've got different dashboards that are kind of polished up and clean. The idea, I think story points is really where Tableau is trying to kind of compete with PowerPoint. My recommendations usually with story points that have at least worked well with me is when I've got dashboards I'm ready to share, it's interactive, I'll go ahead and use it. When I find that I am veering heavier and heavier into text in certain dashboards, as like trying to kind of have PowerPoint supplemental sort of text slides along with the story points, that's usually when I'll hop out of Tableau. I'll go into Google Slides for me, basically because there's spell check, and that makes me nervous that there's no spell check with Tableau. But when I've got something that is sort of finished and I'm ready to share, this is usually where at least on my end, where I will tend to use it. So that's for the people who haven't used story points before, that's kind of where that is. If you look at it actually in Tableau, what you'll see is there's new sheet, there's a new dashboard, and then you've got this guy here, new story. So you make a new story and you can add additional stories points along the top here. And then in the same way that you usually drag and drop your worksheets onto your dashboards, here you can go ahead and take your dashboards onto your story points. So it's kind of an overview for folks who haven't used it. That's at least how I use it. Anyone else? Story points, something that you use all the time or something that hasn't worked well for you? Any thoughts?
I've used them more like several years ago at a former agency, but with the new like button navigation feature that you can use in dashboards, I actually like that a lot better. So for my interview project for my current job, I was thinking about using a story and I was like, I'm spending way too much time trying to configure this story. So I just did like a nav button and then I could just click between my dashboards and it was like way easier. So like I like that approach better than stories, but like stories are cool. I just like struggled with them.
I think it's so funny that you mentioned that. I had a project last spring where I wanted the top 3 to be the story points buttons, but I wanted to have text on either side in this sort of 5-pronged thing. So I ended up making 3 buttons that take you to the 3 places, and then 2 text boxes to balance out on either side. So I agree with you completely that the navigation button has opened up a lot of doors for people. Anyone else? Any other thoughts on story points? And Clay, does that answer your question? Or
I have found story points again. If I want my users to be guided or directed in a specific direction, it's quite helpful. I mean, you can actually, let's say, identify outliers at different stages and add some text about it. For my projects, most of the time, a lot of it is drilled down and just a bunch of filtering and then finally get to the end results. So that's why dashboard format works better for me. I've tried story points or I think storyboard, something it was called earlier before, but it was very limited.
I think that's a perfect sort of example of when it's most successful is when you are trying to walk someone through an argument. And I've even seen people do really wonderful things where they've got the same basic dashboard 3 or 4 times, but they're pointing out or they're annotating something different that they're walking folks through. So yeah, that's a fantastic point. So I think we'll open this up. Any other big picture questions? You guys have had some fantastic questions along the way. And I'm loving everyone who's jumped in here with your own expertise, advice, experience. Any other questions for the group? Maybe this is another way to phrase that. Biggest current frustration with Tableau. I feel like Tableau user groups so often are like, what's amazing about Tableau? But sometimes frustrations are where there's someone else has already solved something, or something we should send back to the company and say, please build this.
Font rendering.
Yeah, font rendering, spell check. Sounds like we've got some.
I never really noticed the lack of spell check until a really glaring spelling error in a dashboard title, and it had been there for 2 years, and I was like, how did no one notice this? The company's name was spelled wrong.
Yeah, that would be a very, very big one. Client's name incorrect. Wendy, I see here you've got level of detail. So either in the chat or if you want to just sort of give us a bigger explanation, are those LOD calcs or what else is coming to mind?
Yeah, it's a level of detail calculation. Just frustrated that it's something that should be super easy, and I think level of detail is my solution.
Excellent.
So
have you had any experience with LOD calcs?
I have, but it's been probably close to a year since I worked with them, and so it's, I think, relearning. Yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah, I'm
out on the Tableau site looking stuff up, trying to figure out what I'm doing wrong.
Yeah, LOD calcs can be so incredible when they work and so frustrating when you're like, my gosh, I really thought I understood. My favorite way to do an LOD calc troubleshooting session is with crosstabs, where I have built some sort of crosstab that I know the answer should be the same for all of the things I've broken out. And sometimes that can be a helpful place for me to start troubleshooting. And actually, I've got here, let me give you an example really fast, because I've got one pulled up just in case it's helpful. Always got the zoom bar in the wrong place. I need it at the top if it's at the bottom. I need it at the bottom if it's at the top. This was a workbook where I was talking a presentation that is online. You can go find it. It's on my website. Another TUG event, but we were talking through sort of taking sketches that you've created and then turning them into actual things in Tableau. So start with a sketch and then build it out. Here's an LOD calc that's actually working. So this is a a pretty simple bar chart. We've got the number of applications for the University of Kansas over time. And then we've got the client was interested sort of in, one of the big questions we get asked all the time is like, whoa, how has something changed in the last 10 years? Well, if you're actually asking in the last 10 years, we've seen a 42% increase in applications. That's one answer. And then another answer could be sort of like, here's the detail over time. The reason I bring this up is this 42%, and we should really go ahead and format, make that the same color as the line. So when we're talking about the 42% here, we're going from 2010 to 2019. That's the jump that we're talking about, that 42%. This is actually an LOD calc. And what you can see when you start to build it is that this 42% should be identical for all 10 years. So if I look at the header, which I believe is, we've got the application header here. This is the percent change. This is the calculation. One of the things that I will end up doing, this is saying just exclude the year. So LOD calcs, for folks that might be new to them, we've got fixed, include, and exclude. The idea with an LOD calc is that the calculation you're creating is going to be at a different level of detail than the visualization that you've actually created. When we think about the visualization we've created, any pill that we've brought in, any data pill that we've brought in to actually create our visualization is now part of the level of detail of that chart. So for here, for example, we have broken down the number of applications received by the year, right? 2010, 2011, 2012, all the way through 2019. So when we do that, and then we ask Tableau to give us a calculation for this entire visualization, the problem is this level of detail for this calculation is a different level of detail than the visualization itself. We do not want to know the change every single year. We actually want a start and an end. And we want Tableau to ignore the other things that are happening in our visualization. So that's where, if you're new to LOD calcs, that's where they're coming from. What I usually would try to do is, if we could comment this out, I would usually try to go ahead and take my calculation and put it in a place where I know that we should get the answer 42% for all of these years, and go ahead and put it somewhere like this, where it's going to go ahead and repeat for all of the years, where I can see it actually do that. And then that tends to be how I start to troubleshoot LOD calcs, is like, where should they overlap and be the same? And so I don't know if that's at all, I'll stop sharing there. I don't know if that's at all helpful, Wendy, but
yeah, I think that helped.
I returned to the cross tab.
I had a little aha there. So hopefully
good.
Yeah.
Any follow-up questions or thoughts?
No,
or
I think I have my Friday night cut out for me. That's not good.
Uh-oh, we should be going happy hour direction, not back to the dashboard, but hopefully that means inspiration.
Yes, thank you. Thanks.
Yeah. Well, here we've got another question. Here, George, you're talking about end of life for Tableau server. So as moved to November, is anyone else working on that? Any other folks that are in the Tableau server side of the equation? And George, if you want to give a little explanation, you're welcome to, for folks who may not know what's happened.
Well, basically, Tableau has a third-party tool within their server, which is basically going out of support in November. So all versions 2020.3 and earlier are basically going end of support, or end of life. So it means that, and this is happening to us at the same time. Last month, we were supposed to migrate from 2020.3 to 2021.1.3, which had just come out at the end of June. But then all of a sudden, Tableau came back and said, wait, one of our big customers has a problem with that version, don't go. So now we're sitting here waiting for a version from Tableau that'll let us migrate away from 2020.3, but we have to do it before November. So Tableau has us caught in this middle where we're waiting for a version that we can go to that's stable. That'll get us past their 2020.3 end of life in November.
Oh, and that sounds really frustrating. Is anyone else on the I'm not usually on the Tableau server side of things, but anyone else navigating that or have clients that are navigating that? I know updates like that can always be very tricky. And, you know, it's interesting to think about end of life for something that literally was last year.
Right.
Because I've worked with clients that are like, we're on 2018.3. And I'm like, well, the thing you're trying to have me build comes out in 2019.4. So if we could just update, then that would be in Tableau Desktop. But there's so many other layers there on the Tableau server side of things. And Tableau server is usually not the only it's not the only tool folks are usually maintaining. So that can be, you know, trying to shuffle that all together.
On our side in healthcare, we're very slow to upgrade. I mean, we're a large corporation. You know, Kaiser Permanente is a big group. We've got hundreds of users and all that stuff. So our migrations are generally pretty slow, and we try to stay a couple versions behind, basically. Mm-hmm. We're never going to the latest and greatest. So, and we'll do it a couple times a year, going a step behind. So, yeah, this is not a comfortable place to be in right now with that November deadline coming really quickly, actually.
Yeah. Oh, it's somehow it's already August, and absolutely. Well, I think that's a really, I am sure there are many folks that are also navigating that. And so that's an important thing for, you know, folks in the sort of the broader community to know about, but also something that it sounds like Tableau really needs to sort out as well. Excellent.
I have something I recently discovered that was surprising and a little bit frustrating. So we had I had a team member on the data team who set up a number of users over the past year and subscribed them to a number of reports. So he basically was responsible for, you know, subscriptions and setting up users. And then that user left. I mean, that employee left the company. So when you delete somebody from the server, all the subscriptions that person set up get canceled. And that was, and I actually, you know, looked up, you know, knowledge-based search, and apparently that's a kind of like a known feature almost. So that was really frustrating. So I still solve this. If I left, for example, nobody would get any reports.
Well, that is a fantastic sort of thing to know about and awareness when you use, you know, for folks who maybe are still getting their Tableau server set up, or even thinking long term, how do you make something ideally that could run without anyone? I always like to use the example, like, you know, someone's going to win the lottery, be on their way out. How do you have something that is stable? That's a fantastic thing to know about as well on the server side. And I notice we're getting down to the last couple of minutes here. So Caitlin, Greg, is there anything else that you kind of want to direct people to as we're kind of coming to the end of our time together?
The only couple things, if you guys are hiring for any Tableau related positions at your companies and you'd like to discuss them, we can use kind of remaining time for that. If you just want to introduce yourself, come off a video, use a little bit of time for networking, that's great. Really, whatever you guys want to chat about in the last few minutes.
And if you do have to drop off, one more plug on getting connected on the community and social media to stay updated on future events.
Yeah, thank you, Greg.